When I started practicing, audits were all about the money. That's what we cared about. We were looking for verifying payments were accurate. What I've seen is that they're increasingly becoming about compliance. They're no longer just about calculating the payments. They're about making sure your counterparty is not using slave labor, is not using child labor, is not using conflict minerals, or is complying with your privacy and data security requirements. One of the first questions we look at is who can perform the audit. If you're the auditor, more likely the party that's auditing, you want all the flexibility in the world. If you're the auditee, sometimes you don't even want your counterparty coming in and poking around in your books. So you might even say, no counterparty, no Peter, you cannot come audit me, but I'll allow you to appoint a big four accounting firm and I'll let them do it, but they have to sign an NDA and we're going to limit the scope of what they're going to look at. And there's lots of things you can do. Thinking about which position you are really defines who should perform the audit. The same in terms of the scope. This is huge. It didn't used to be as big of a deal when we were just talking money. Now that we're really potentially going into anything relating to the agreement, you can have this audit become extremely big. And basically, it's like pre-litigation discovery that you can find out everything you need to know. We think about how often. Now, the reality is it's very expensive to audit, and most customers do not do it. Even if they have audit in their provisions, it's very rarely done at a physical level. I think it's done more with digital access and checking systems for things, but not when you're actually somebody's going on site, inspecting, talking to people, doing all that. It just doesn't happen very often. So this is one where we have it in there, but the reality is it's usually not that big of a deal. The same is when, only during business hours when it's not disruptive. I've never in my career seen or heard of anybody having problems with this. I'm sure it could happen in theory, but this isn't something I worry too much about. Notice this is nice to have, but it's usually a compromise 7 days, 14 days, 30 days is pretty long, no restrictions pretty short. Consequence of who pays for the audit. This can be a big one because audits can be expensive. So if you're the auditee, you may want to make sure that if your vendor owes you money, maybe you undercharged, that you're going to get that paid back. But as the auditor, you're looking for the auditee to not only pay back money that you overpaid, but also to cover the cost of the audit. And then this is a big one, and I see a lot of people miss this, which is how long after the end of the term do you need the right to audit? Just saying the audit provision survives may not be enough. There's conflicting case law on this point of whether saying an audit provision survives without anything else is enough to get you that right to audit a year after the term. So if you want that right to audit, make sure you're explicit and say you have the right to continue to audit for 2 years after the end of the term and then make sure that provision survives.